Exit right.
Hello friends, welcome to your channel Gaming Sim Life. I'm your host Dev, and today we're delving into a fascinating topic that touches on the very heart of religious belief, the experiential argument for God. This argument, unlike many others we've discussed in our series, doesn't rely on abstract philosophical reasoning or scientific evidence. Instead, it centers on something deeply personal and often transformative: religious experiences. The experiential argument for God posits that personal religious experiences provide direct evidence of God's existence. It's an approach that has intrigued philosophers, theologians, and believers for centuries, and continues to be a subject of intense debate in our modern world. Today, we'll explore this argument in depth, examining its strengths, weaknesses, and implications for our understanding of faith and reality. Before we dive into the argument itself, it's crucial that we understand what we mean by religious experiences. These are not everyday occurrences, but rather profound, often life-changing encounters that individuals interpret as direct contact with the divine or sacred. Religious experiences come in various forms, each with its own characteristics and significance. Let's explore some of the main types. First, we have mystical experiences. These are perhaps the most intense and enigmatic of religious experiences. Mystics across various religious traditions have reported direct, ineffable encounters with what they perceive as ultimate reality or the divine. These experiences are often characterized by a sense of unity with the universe, a dissolution of the self, and an overwhelming feeling of love or bliss. They're typically described as beyond words, defying our normal categories of thought and perception. The 16th century Spanish mystic Saint Teresa of Avila, for instance, described her mystical encounters in vivid, often startling terms. In one account, she writes of an angel piercing her heart with a golden spear, leaving her all on fire with a great love of God. Such descriptions, while highly personal and subjective, have been remarkably consistent across different cultures and historical periods. Next, we have numinous experiences. These are encounters characterized by a profound sense of awe, reverence, and often fear in the presence of what is perceived as sacred or divine. The term numinous was coined by the German theologian Rudolf Otto to describe this particular quality of religious experience. Unlike mystical experiences, which often involve a sense of unity or merging with the divine, numinous experiences maintain a sense of otherness, a confrontation with something wholly different from ordinary reality. A classic example of a numinous experience is the biblical account of Moses encountering God in the burning bush. The narrative emphasizes Moses' sense of fear and unworthiness in the presence of the divine, as well as the overwhelming power and mystery of the experience. Conversion experiences form another important category. These are transformative events that lead to a significant change in belief, worldview, or life direction. While not all conversion experiences involve dramatic visions or supernatural occurrences, they are often described as moments of sudden insight or revelation that profoundly alter an individual's understanding of reality and their place in it. The conversion of St. Paul on the road to Damascus is perhaps the most famous example in Western religious tradition. Paul's encounter with what he believed to be the risen Christ not only changed his personal beliefs but had a profound impact on the early Christian church and, consequently, on Western civilization as a whole. Lastly, we have communal experiences. These are collective religious experiences that occur in the context of rituals, worship, or other group activities. While perhaps less dramatic than individual mystical or conversion experiences, these shared encounters can be deeply meaningful and reinforcing for religious communities. Examples might include the sense of collective ecstasy reported in Pentecostal worship services, or the shared experience of the divine presence during Muslim prayers at the Kaaba in Mecca. These communal experiences often serve to strengthen social bonds and reinforce shared beliefs within religious groups. It's important to note that religious experiences don't occur in a vacuum. They are deeply influenced by historical and cultural contexts. Different religions and cultures have their own ways of interpreting and valuing religious experiences. For instance, in some Buddhist traditions, experiences of emptiness or non-self are seen as insights into the true nature of reality. In contrast, Theistic religions like Christianity or Islam might interpret similar experiences as encounters with a personal God. The cultural context also shapes how these experiences are expressed and understood. The language and imagery used to describe religious experiences often draw heavily on the cultural and religious background of the individual. A Christian mystic might describe their experience in terms of union with Christ, while a Sufi mystic might use the language of intoxication with divine love. Throughout history, numerous figures have reported profound religious experiences that have shaped not only their own lives but often the course of religious and cultural history. We've already mentioned Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint Paul, but there are many others. The 13th century Persian poet Rumi, for instance, wrote extensively about his mystical experiences, using the language of love and intoxication to describe his encounters with the divine. His poetry, born out of these experiences, has had a lasting impact on Islamic mysticism and world literature. In the Eastern tradition, figures like the Buddha or the Hindu sage Ramana Maharshi reported experiences of enlightenment that formed the basis for entire spiritual traditions. The Buddha's experience of awakening under the Bodhi tree is central to Buddhist teaching, while Ramana Maharshi's experience of self-realization as a teenager shaped his entire philosophy and teaching method. More recently, figures like Martin Luther King Jr. have spoken of religious experiences that informed their social and political activism. King described a kitchen table experience where, in a moment of despair, he felt the presence of God giving him strength to continue his civil rights work. These examples illustrate the profound impact that religious experiences can have, not just on individuals, but on entire cultures and historical movements. They form the backdrop against which we can begin to understand the experiential argument for God. Now that we have a foundation for understanding religious experiences, let's turn our attention to the experiential argument for God itself. At its core, this argument claims that personal religious experiences provide direct evidence of God's existence. It's an approach that moves away from abstract philosophical reasoning or scientific evidence, focusing instead on the immediate, lived experiences of individuals. The key claim of the experiential argument is this: if people have experiences that seem to them to be direct encounters with God, then we have good reason to believe that God actually exists. This argument rests on the idea that our experiences, in general, provide us with reliable information about reality. Just as we trust our sensory experiences to tell us about the physical world, proponents of this argument suggest we should trust religious experiences as indicators of a spiritual reality. It's important to note the distinction between subjective and objective evidence here. Religious experiences are inherently subjective. They happen within the mind of the individual and can't be directly observed or measured by others. This is different from objective evidence, which can be independently verified and tested. However, proponents of the experiential argument contend that the subjective nature of these experiences doesn't necessarily negate their evidential value. They argue that many of our most important beliefs about consciousness, the existence of other minds, or the reality of the past are also based on subjective experiences that we generally accept as reliable. The philosophical foundations for this argument can be traced back to William James, the American philosopher and psychologist who wrote the seminal work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, in 1902. James approached religious experiences from a pragmatic perspective, arguing that their practical effects on individuals' lives gave them a kind of validity regardless of their ultimate metaphysical truth. James wrote, "The truth of a religious experience is to be judged by its fruits, not by its roots." In other words, if a religious experience leads to positive transformations in a person's life, greater compassion, ethical behavior, or personal fulfillment, then it has a pragmatic truth that shouldn't be dismissed, even if we can't verify the objective reality of the experience itself. Two philosophical principles often invoked in support of the experiential argument are the principle of credulity and the principle of testimony. The principle of credulity, as formulated by the philosopher Richard Swinburne, states that, if it seems to a subject that X is present, then probably X is present. What one seems to perceive is probably so. In the context of religious experiences, this principle suggests that if someone has an experience that seems to them to be an encounter with God, then we should initially trust that perception, just as we initially trust our perceptions of the physical world. The principle of testimony, on the other hand, states that we should generally trust what others tell us about their experiences unless we have good reason to doubt them. Applied to religious experiences, this principle suggests that if many people across different times and cultures report similar experiences of the divine, we should take these reports seriously. These principles don't provide absolute proof, but they offer a philosophical framework for taking religious experiences seriously as potential evidence for God's existence. They challenge the skeptical assumption that all religious experiences must be dismissed as delusions or misinterpretations, suggesting instead that we should approach them with an open mind, weighing them alongside other forms of evidence and reasoning. Now that we've outlined the basic structure of the experiential argument, let's examine some of its key strengths. One of the most compelling aspects of this argument is the subjective certainty it provides to those who have religious experiences. Many individuals who report religious experiences describe them as more real and vivid than their everyday experiences. They often speak of an overwhelming sense of certainty, a conviction that what they've experienced is not just real, but the most real thing they've ever encountered. This intense certainty can be so powerful that it transforms people's lives, altering their beliefs, behaviors, and entire worldviews. Consider, for example, the experience of the 20th century British writer C.S. Lewis. Lewis, who had been an atheist, described a moment of conversion where he felt approached by God. He wrote, "I gave in and admitted that God was God, and knelt and prayed. Perhaps, that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England." This experience not only changed Lewis's personal beliefs but led to him becoming one of the most influential Christian apologists of the 20th century. The transformative impact of these experiences is a key part of their persuasive power. Proponents of the experiential argument point out that these aren't fleeting emotions or vague impressions, but profound encounters that often lead to lasting changes in people's lives. Individuals may report becoming more compassionate, overcoming addictions, finding a new sense of purpose, or experiencing a complete reorientation of their values and priorities. Another strength of the experiential argument is the cumulative case it presents. While any single religious experience might be dismissed as an anomaly or misinterpretation, the sheer number and consistency of these experiences across different cultures and historical periods lends them a collective weight. From ancient mystics to modern-day believers, people have been reporting encounters with the divine for as long as we have historical records. These experiences, while varying in their specific content, often share striking similarities in their basic features: a sense of transcendence, feelings of awe and reverence, a perception of ultimate reality or truth. Moreover, these experiences often find corroboration within religious communities. When individuals share their experiences, they often find that others have had similar encounters. This mutual reinforcement can strengthen the conviction that these experiences reflect a genuine reality rather than merely subjective impressions. The philosopher Richard Swinburne argues that this cumulative evidence strengthens the case for the validity of religious experiences. He suggests that if religious experiences were merely hallucinations or misinterpretations, we would expect them to be more random and divergent. The fact that they often converge on similar themes and descriptions, he argues, points to a common source, potentially a divine reality. A third strength of the experiential argument is its compatibility with theism. Religious experiences, if taken at face value, fit naturally within a theistic worldview. They provide a direct, personal dimension to the idea of God, complementing more abstract philosophical arguments. In many theistic traditions, God is conceived not just as a distant creator or first cause, but as a being who desires relationship with humans. Religious experiences in this context can be seen as moments of divine self-revelation, instances where God makes his presence known to individuals in a personal, immediate way. Proponents of the argument contend that the existence of a personal God who interacts with humans provides the best explanation for the nature and prevalence of religious experiences. They argue that alternative explanations, psychological, neurological, or sociocultural, while potentially explaining some aspects of these experiences, fail to fully account for their profound impact and consistent features across different contexts. Furthermore, religious experiences often align with and reinforce other theistic arguments. For instance, someone who has had a profound sense of divine love in a religious experience might find this aligns with moral arguments for God's existence, which often posit a supremely good being as the source of objective moral values. In this way, the experiential argument can be seen as part of a cumulative case for theism, working in concert with other lines of reasoning to build a comprehensive case for God's existence. While the experiential argument for God has its strengths, it also faces significant challenges and criticisms. One of the primary challenges is the issue of subjectivity and verifiability. Religious experiences, by their very nature, are deeply personal and subjective. They occur within the mind of the individual and cannot be directly observed or measured by others. This subjectivity poses a problem for those who demand empirical, scientifically verifiable evidence for God's existence. Critics argue that while we might trust our ordinary sense experiences because they can be corroborated by others and tested through repeated observations, religious experiences don't offer the same kind of public, reproducible evidence. From a psychological perspective, skeptics argue that religious experiences can be explained as natural phenomena of the human mind, without needing to invoke supernatural causes. They point to various psychological states that can produce experiences similar to those described in religious contexts, altered states of consciousness, intense emotions, or even certain types of hallucinations. For instance, the psychologist Abraham Maslow studied what he called peak experiences, moments of transcendence, awe, and unity that closely resemble religious experiences but which Maslow interpreted as purely natural psychological phenomena. He argued that these experiences, while profound and potentially life-changing, didn't necessarily point to any supernatural reality. Another significant challenge to the experiential argument comes from alternative explanations rooted in neuroscience. Advances in brain imaging and neuroscientific research have allowed scientists to study the neural correlates of religious and mystical experiences. Some researchers have found that certain types of religious experiences are associated with specific patterns of brain activity. For example, studies have shown that meditation and prayer can activate areas of the brain associated with attention and emotional regulation. More dramatically, some researchers have suggested that intense religious experiences might be linked to temporal lobe epilepsy or other neurological conditions. Michael Persinger, a cognitive neuroscientist, even developed a device nicknamed the God Helmet that uses weak magnetic fields to stimulate the temporal lobes, reportedly inducing experiences that subjects describe as spiritual or mystical. While the results of Persinger's experiments are controversial and have been challenged by other researchers, they highlight the potential for neurological explanations of religious experiences. Critics argue that if religious experiences can be induced or explained by brain activity, this undermines their value as evidence for God's existence. They contend that these experiences, however profound they may feel to the individual, are ultimately products of our evolved neurobiology rather than encounters with a transcendent reality. Sociocultural explanations offer another challenge to the experiential argument. Anthropologists and sociologists have long studied how cultural and social factors shape religious experiences and their interpretations. They point out that the specific content and interpretation of religious experiences often align closely with the cultural and religious background of the individual. A Christian might interpret a profound spiritual experience as an encounter with Jesus, while a Hindu might interpret a similar experience as a union with Brahman. This cultural shaping of experiences raises questions about their reliability as evidence for any particular religious truth claim. Moreover, sociologists argue that social and cultural factors can create the conditions for religious experiences. The power of suggestion, group dynamics, and cultural expectations can all play a role in shaping how individuals perceive and interpret intense emotional or psychological states. From a philosophical perspective, one of the most significant challenges to the experiential argument is the problem of conflicting religious experiences. Throughout history and across cultures, people have reported religious experiences that seem to point to different, often incompatible, religious truths. A devout Muslim might have an experience they interpret as an encounter with Allah, while a Hindu mystic might experience a dissolution of self that they interpret as union with Brahman. A Christian might have a vision of Jesus, while a Buddhist might experience a state of nirvana that they understand as the cessation of individual existence. These conflicting experiences pose a dilemma for the experiential argument. If we accept religious experiences as evidence for God's existence, how do we adjudicate between different and incompatible claims? Critics argue that this diversity of experiences undermines their reliability as evidence for any particular religious truth. Another philosophical criticism centers on the difficulty of distinguishing genuine religious experiences from hallucinations, illusions, or self-delusion. While proponents of the experiential argument often appeal to the life-changing nature of these experiences as evidence of their validity, critics point out that people can be profoundly affected by experiences that are demonstrably not real. For instance, people with certain mental health conditions may have hallucinations that feel intensely real and may even lead to significant life changes, but which we generally don't accept as evidence of an external reality. The challenge, then, is to provide criteria for distinguishing genuine, religious experiences from other intense subjective experiences that we don't typically grant evidential value. Despite these criticisms, the experiential argument for God continues to have a significant impact, particularly on individual belief. For many people, personal religious experiences are the most compelling reason for their belief in God. These experiences often form the core of an individual's faith, providing a sense of direct, personal encounter with the divine that abstract philosophical arguments or scientific evidence cannot match. The power of religious experiences in shaping belief is evident in countless testimonies of conversion and spiritual transformation. Many individuals report that a single powerful religious experience was enough to overturn years of skepticism or indifference. Even for those raised within a religious tradition, personal experiences often serve to deepen and solidify their faith, moving it from inherited belief to personal conviction. The role of religious experiences in conversion and spiritual growth cannot be overstated. Many religious traditions actively encourage practices designed to facilitate these experiences, recognizing their power to transform lives and strengthen faith. Meditation, prayer, fasting, and various forms of worship are often seen not just as duties or rituals, but as means of cultivating a direct, experiential relationship with the divine. In the realm of apologetic, the intellectual defense of religious belief, the experiential argument plays a unique and important role. Unlike more abstract philosophical arguments for God's existence, such as the cosmological or ontological arguments, the experiential argument has an immediate, personal quality that many find compelling. Apologists often use this argument to complement other lines of reasoning. They might argue, for instance, that while the fine-tuning of the universe suggests an intelligent designer, personal religious experiences give us reason to believe that this designer is not just an impersonal force, but a being who desires relationship with humans. Moreover, the experiential argument can be particularly effective in addressing the problem of divine hiddenness, the question of why, if God exists, he doesn't make his existence more obvious. Proponents of the argument contend that God does make his existence known, not through universal public demonstrations, but through personal encounters with individuals who are open to such experiences. When comparing the experiential argument to other arguments for God's existence, several distinctions become apparent. Unlike the cosmological argument, which reasons from the existence of the universe to a first cause, or the teleological argument, which infers a designer from the apparent design in nature, the experiential argument claims to offer direct rather than inferential evidence of God. This directness is both a strength and a weakness of the argument. On one hand, it provides a kind of immediate certainty to those who have these experiences that other arguments can't match. On the other hand, it's more vulnerable to skeptical challenges, as these experiences can't be independently verified in the way that, say, fine-tuning constants in physics can be. The experiential argument also has interesting implications for interfaith perspectives. While other arguments for God's existence tend to be more aligned with specific theological traditions, religious experiences are reported across a wide range of faiths and cultures.